How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode. So about 6 months ago to the day, actually, I made a video on my Squarebody Chevy Suburban. It had a 6.2 liter diesel in it, and I mentioned that I was looking for a bunch of parts and I wanted to do a Cummins swap and whatnot. Well, long story short, just about 6 months later, almost to the day, I got it finished to the point where I've been able to drive it around and start having fun with it. Figured I would just come back on here to make a kind of a comprehensive video on the truck and show you guys what's changed and what's still the same. Anyways, stay tuned. So here it is as it sits. It sits on a 6-inch suspension lift with 37-inch tires. Those of you that tuned into the last video I posted about this truck a couple months ago might notice a couple things off the bat that have changed. It's kind of hard to see with the sun glare, but I did install some electric fans here in the front to accommodate what is now under the hood. So we'll talk about some real basic things first about the truck, just to get everyone updated on it, and then we'll dive into the really in-depth stuff towards the second half of the video and give you guys the full lowdown on how I got to where I am right now with the build. So we'll work front to back. I am running a GM Dana 60 in the front with off-road designs, crossover high steer to make that steering nice and tight with the larger tires. I am also running Toyo Open Country MTs. These are a 37 13.5 with a 17-inch wheel. I do still have steel wheels as well. As I had mentioned before, this is a 6-inch suspension lift. When I initially had lifted the truck, and I think this is in my last video as well, I installed a 6-inch off-road design shackle flip kit in the rear, which not only gives you some extra flex, but it does add a good number of inches to the lift in the back and makes the ride a lot nicer than just having the factory springs. As y'all can probably tell, not much has changed with the lift and suspension components or the tires, but what has changed is the entire drivetrain. Shortly after I made my last video, I was able to get started on this project, pulling out the old 6.2 liter diesel with the 700 R4 automatic transmission, and I ended up installing a VE pump 12 valve Cummins motor out of a 1993 Dodge W250. Shortly after I made my last video as well, I was able to source an NV4500 transmission and transfer case as well, and I will show you those here in just a moment. Now, this video is by no means a how to install a Cummins into a square body Chevy like this. I would like to show you guys a couple things that I did that I wish I might have done differently, or things I did that worked great and ended up saving me tons of time as well. When installing a motor like the Cummins, there's two things that are going to save you time, and those two things are the Summit Racing motor mounts and the PA Performance alternator. It's a one-wire alternator, so you don't have to deal with goofing around with all of the conversions that you would have to do from the Dodge alternator to make it work with the Chevy and whatnot. You just spend the $400, buy the PA Performance alternator, and get her going like that. I also did, to get me going, I did an AC delete on the truck. The factory Dodge, it's got the AC compressor way down here on the bottom, so you would have to actually notch out the frame in this general area, which I didn't want to have to do being a 4x4. These trucks' frames are known for cracking without having extra bracing anyways, and especially with the high torque, I just wasn't necessarily comfortable with that. And without major modification, it's going to be easier in the long run to get a high mount AC kit, which you can buy as well. The Summit Racing motor mounts, couldn't really recommend those enough. They drop right in with the factory clamshells for the 6.2, 454 or 350 gas motors, and they sit your back, your most rear valve cover about 1 inch to 1/2 inch away from the firewall once you remove all of the insulation and whatnot, and that's able to get you some extra clearance up here in the front. So now, what did I do about the radiator? I bought a 2nd gen Dodge radiator. It's a little bit wider than the factory one. Now, if I could go back, I'd probably buy a 1st gen Dodge radiator and run the mechanical fan, because the 1st gen one is a lot skinnier and it's shorter this way as well. I had to do a lot of modification to the core support to get this to fit in here. And as you can see, I'm not able to run a mechanical fan. And it's because I'm not able to run that, I had to go with the electric fans here in the front, which I'm not complaining about. They keep the truck pretty cool. But it would have saved me a lot of time and whatnot to be able to have the mechanical fan with the smaller radiator as well. And I think it still would have worked great. But hey, live and learn, right? This was my first Cummins swap. I was kind of learning everything about these motors as I went into it. As you can see, I was doing a local cruise night and had to install some really cheap blinkers temporarily. That way we were at least legal. But I did want to talk about my next challenge here, and that would be mounting in the intercooler. There's quite a bit of videos on it. I did end up using the 2nd gen intercooler, and the way that I did that was basically you have to cut out like a 4x12 or 6x12 slot here in the core support in order to get that intercooler to sit level in there. Once you do that, you drill a couple holes in your core support on the bottom. I'll see if I can get some shots of those, and she drops right in. My next major challenge was power steering and how am I going to get the brakes working, as well as the wiring. So I'll show you that here. It's really not that hard. I really wanted to use the factory throttle cable as well, so I welded up this bracket that mounts to the side of the VE pump and measured my spacing here, and it was exactly right. I did end up taking off the factory 1st gen throttle linkage and just connecting it directly to the throttle here. Gives really good response. I did end up using yet another 2nd gen Dodge part. That's a 2nd gen Dodge power steering pump, and it is connected to the vacuum pump as well. I think I might need vacuum for a couple accessories on this truck, and if that's the case, some guys do a vacuum delete right here, but I wanted to keep the vacuum pump because I can steal vacuum right there from just that one line and still run my hydro boost off the very back here. And all of the Chevy lines plug right into the Dodge, no problems. Some people are scared to show under their hood, but hey, I'm not scared to show it. I do have a big rat's nest of wires still going on. It hasn't been too long since I've got this thing going, and I do plan to strip the whole harness down because you really only end up using probably maybe 5 or 6 wires, including the sensors. You just need key on power to the VE pump, and you need your starter wires, and that's really it. Once you have that, this thing will run. If we can accept the fact I have over 50 probably wires I'm not using here right at the moment. 6.2s require a lot. The next obstacle I had to overcome was my clutch mount bracket right here. I had to make this because I wanted to use the factory 1st gen clutch master slave, and which I was able to find online to work with my transmission down there. What I ended up doing was welding a bracket for the factory Chevy mounting points, and then used a 2-inch piece of 2-inch diameter pipe, welded that in the middle, and then welded the clutch mount bracket at the correct angle so I could get my fluid reservoir here at the right angle as well. I'm going to do the same thing with this truck that I did on the other one and make a nice little bracket for this as well, so it's not just rattling around. Right at the moment, she's just got a zip tie on there for driving around town and whatnot. I did end up running hydro boost as well. The hydro boost in here is something that you've got to do if you're lifted with big old tires. Makes the braking a lot better, as well as not having to goof around with a vacuum pump to get your brakes to work. These diesels don't really make much vacuum as it is, so doing the hydro boost was lucky. I already had a diesel in here, so it came with the hydro boost factory, but if not, that is definitely something that I would swap out on your build. As far as cooling goes, you just have these 2 heater core lines, and you just run those right over the top of the AC unit and then plug them right into your factory heater core. Mine was so old that when I went to pull them off the factory heater core, when I was cutting through them, the heater core was actually, it was a factory brass nipples on there, and it just broke off. So I ended up doing a new heater core while I was in there as well. And you've probably noticed these really ugly looking batteries as well. I plan on getting some Optima yellow tops for these guys and running a dual battery like I am right now. That way she cranks perfect every time. Now, what the heck did I do about a transmission? A couple months after I talked to you guys on my last video here, I was actually able to source an NV4500. That NV4500 was actually out of a 96 Chevy 3500, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but if you use that, you can actually use the second gen Dodge bell housing for the Dodge NV4500, and it will bolt right up. The only difference being you get a Chevy 32 spline output on that transmission versus the Dodge that's a 29 spline, and you get a different output as far as the bolt pattern as well. So you're able to run a Chevy transfer case. When I bought it, I actually thought that I was buying a Dodge, but upon doing extra research, I found out, oh, it's actually a Chevy. Somebody just had changed the input shaft on the transmission. So look out for that if you're buying used. It ended up being a little bit of a blessing in disguise though, because what I was able to do with the transfer case, I really impressed myself on that one. I wanted to do a 205, but turns out finding a 205 with a 32 spline long shaft and a 6-bolt pattern is next to impossible, and if you can find them, they're $1 million. So what I ended up doing is with that transmission, he also gave me a driver's side drop 241C transfer case, which in my scenario wasn't going to work, so I thought anyways, because I have a passenger side drop diff. So what I ended up doing was I pulled that transfer case apart and I went on Tom Woods Driveshafts, and they sell a slip yoke eliminator, because I knew I didn't want a slip yoke in my 241 or just on any of my off-road rigs, especially with this kind of power going through it. And I wanted to be able to run a Tom Woods drive shaft. So what I did is I took out the 32 spline input that was on the driver's side transfer case, and I installed that into my Chevy 27 spline right hand drop 241 that I already had from the other truck. Then what I did at that point was I installed that Tom Woods intermittent shaft, the big one, 32 spline, so it wouldn't break under the torque of the truck. And I have confidence in it. I think these are going to be strong enough parts to hold up to a non-built Cummins motor. If I was pushing, 1,000 horsepower or something like that, I probably would have spent the extra money, went to a 205. But honestly, pulling a transfer case apart, going through the gears is something I wanted to do regardless. I learned how to rebuild them. Didn't really dive into the transmission too much, just did a full reseal on it and made sure everything checked out. It's already got the 5th gear nut in there as well, and everything shifts great, so I can't complain. As you can see under there, next to my 4-inch exhaust, I've got that slip yoke eliminator on the 241, and then I did go full bore with the Tom Woods shaft. I went with the 4.5-inch 120 wall DOM shaft, ending down there at my 14-bolt full float, which I've done that disc brake conversion on as well, which I talked about in the last video is definitely a must-do if you're going to be taking these trucks off-road as well. Okay, so quick recap on what we got going on with the Suburban. Things I would have done differently. Probably would have bought a donor first-gen Dodge with a VE pump motor, just because being with the wiring and everything, that's going to be the easiest one to swap in here. I would definitely go with the manual and a 205 as well, just so everything's straightforward, ready to go. If you're starting with a half-ton truck as well, those W250s, if you're lucky enough to find one, even if you have to pay 10 or 12 grand for it, in the long run you're saving a ton of money. You can still go back in and reseal the motor and transmission and do everything that you want to do like that, but you can use the diffs, you can use the motor, everything will drop right in if you buy the factory Dodge W250 untouched and the Summit Racing motor mounts. Everything will plug right back in. If I did it again from bare bones, didn't have the truck, didn't have anything, I would buy a 4-wheel drive or a manual Chevy Squarebody, just because it already comes with the transmission tunnel hump, especially if you're going to go with a manual. If you go with a 2-wheel drive, you're going to have to install a hump. You'll have to cut out your floorboard, buy the hump from like Jegs online or something like that, welder in, and then you'll be good to go. Also, if you can find a manual truck, you're already going to have a clutch pedal, especially if it's mid 80s. And if it is mid 80s, or maybe even early 90s, 90, 91 square body stuff, Suburban or 3500 K30, it'll be a hydraulic clutch as well, which is a major score, and that saves you tons of time. Now, I had already had previous experience with putting in a hydraulic clutch and master and slave and everything. If you're unlucky enough like I was, and my truck was automatic and I'm trying to go manual, buying the factory mid 80s hydraulic clutch pedal mount and everything that goes right underneath your column is definitely the way to go. That's something that I would probably do a little bit differently. I ended up buying a kit from a company online that was like a weld together thing. Ended up being quite a bit more complicated. What I did for my last truck was I just bought the factory one. Somebody wanted some crazy amount of money online for it, but it is well worth it. It just drops right in, no hassle. Second thing that I would recommend, buy the PA Performance one wire alternator. It saves so much time. Converting what the factory Dodge output is as far as volts to the Chevy, you end up with a big mess of wires that causes a lot of problems, it seems, for guys. Buy the PA Performance one wire output alternator, one wire to the positive on your battery, you're good to go, nothing else. Third thing I haven't talked about yet, the 2nd gen power steering pump will plug right into your hydro boost on your truck. If you do have a 1st gen motor that's non-intercooled, it might only have a vacuum pump on the left-hand front side of the motor. If you have a square body with a vacuum brake system as well, then that will plug right in. But when you're pushing this kind of weight, would definitely recommend the hydro boost, and that 3 hoses will plug right into your Dodge power steering pump as well. The next thing that you'll have to decide is, do I want to run an intercooler or not? The intercooler does add quite a bit of complexity to the front end. You're still probably, to drop something like this into your truck, you're going to be probably taking off the whole front clip, or at least the core support, like I had to do to even just slide the thing in there. The intercooler, if you're just gonna have like a hot rod you take out every once in a while, I would recommend just buy the 1st gen motor. As non-intercooled, still gonna give you great power. You could still upgrade them a little bit. If you're gonna be towing and doing lots of stuff like that, towing on big grades, definitely do the intercooler upgrade. In my experience, not really seeing too much of a power jump, but it keeps the motor a lot cooler, especially when you're running big tires, manual transmission, lower gears, things like that. The very last thing I totally forgot to mention about this, what are you going to do about an exhaust system? What I ended up doing was a 4-inch straight pipe exhaust. Comes down and snakes right next to the transfer case and goes all the way down the side of the frame rail and over the axle, just like that. I ended up buying a kit for a 1st gen Dodge, and it ends up plugging right in. Well, pretty much plugging right in. The only thing I had an issue with, and as you can see I had to stop a little short here, was coming around the leaf spring, and I think it's because I got a 6-inch lift on here. If this was factory, the leaf would be a lot higher up and it would totally clear, and you could come out basically right underneath your rear fender right here. But what I'm going to do here is put a couple of pie cuts in this and bend it down a little more, and then come back so it's level. And then I plan on making it dump just right here by the fender, and then cutting it off pretty flush. Doing off-roading with an exhaust like this is good because you don't have to worry about crushing anything. But I overall want it to look pretty good. The 4-inch sounds really, really good, especially on startup and hauling down the highway, and it boosts really hard as well. Oh, and I'm probably switching out the valve cover soon as well. Anyways, you guys, that's probably going to do it for today's video on the update on the truck. Took it all the way from a 6.2 liter diesel to a 12 valve 5.9 Cummins with an NV4500 and a 241C transfer case. I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in and sticking with me. This project has been super hard, not only mentally on me, but physically the last few months. Needed a couple weeks after wrenching on this thing for a while to kind of cool down and rejuvenate my body, honestly, after wrenching on this thing for so long. Really puts a wear down on you if you don't take as many breaks as I probably should have. Anyways, just want to thank everyone so much again for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. You guys want to see more truck content like this, I would really appreciate it. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm gonna get a little video for you guys of rowing through the gears. Starting second. Oh man. As you can see, I got the carpet all pulled back. Got the envy. Starting third. Hopefully it doesn't knock my phone over. At least you can hear the sound. Oh yeah. We're doing a little fourth gear pull. Little fourth gear pull.